ahead.
Wonderful. Well, for all of you in the background there, I'm super glad that you're here. So my name is Adam Cuppy, and I'm the president of Learn Academy. I myself didn't join until relatively recently. So I did not found the company whatsoever. I'm joining because I really do believe in what Learn is doing for people transitioning into new career paths, especially into tech. And speaking of which, this whole idea of career transitions fully resonates for me because I did not go to school for programming at all. In fact, I did about the opposite you could do. I actually went to school for stage theater, and I have a degree in performing arts. And I think I took one HTML class in like 2002, 2003, something like that. Otherwise, I'm completely self-taught. So I 100% resonate with the idea of changing paths. I went through marketing into tech, and so all that. But the question I get a lot is whether or not I use my theater degree in any way, shape, or form. And the answer is absolutely. And simply put, I have spent so much time in front of complete strangers that I feel completely comfortable to do it. So that's what brings me here, is to be that person speaking in front of you as the stranger to this equation. And I'm glad that we're here. So here's how I want to handle the questions. And then I want to get into introducing, well, I'll have our guests here, our panelists here, our former students, alumni, and some of them now working for Learn themselves, introduce themselves. But for all of you that are here, I wanted to kind of give an idea for how I wanted to handle the Q&A aspect of things. So as far as this is an AMA. If you're not familiar with the term, it's Ask Me Anything is what that stands for. And you are welcome to ask any question you have about the topic of career transitioning into tech. It doesn't have to be about coming to Learn Academy. It can be entirely around the journey. We've got many other methods and mechanisms. If you have questions about Learn, we can tackle that. This doesn't have to be exclusive to Learn. If you've got questions in any way about, what might I need to know before I join a code school, or if I didn't have the money to join a code school, what other things could I do? Is there certain industries that you came from that are required or something along those lines to get into tech? These are all types of questions you might have, and you're welcome to ask any of them. And I will sort of help work through that. Now, how to ask that question is to use the chat box. Let's stick with that for now. And if we start a dialogue around it and we got more questions and you're open to unmuting yourself or turning on your camera if you feel so comfortable and engaging in a dialogue, let's do that. If not, that's okay. I'll help facilitate some questions here and there, and we'll try and get you an answer. And if you have more questions, our team is more than happy to reach out and work with you on that. Okay, sound good? I'm guessing so. We're going to say we're big thumbs up from all involved. So I want to give everyone that's here on camera right now an opportunity to introduce themselves, including TJ as well, because he's been a part of the team for years now. But other than that, everybody here has been a part of the program in some way, shape, or form. So this is kind of exciting. And either they've continued with Learn or they've gone a different path. So I'm just going to go around my counterclockwise. I don't know if this looks like your counterclockwise at all, or your clockwise. No, I'm going to go around my clockwise. I'm not going to do my counterclockwise. I'll do my clockwise. And if you would, if you could give me an idea of what relationship you had to Learn Academy if you went through the program yourself, and if so, when you did that, and I'd love to know, what did you do before it? So if you were in, I don't know, for me, it was stage acting. If you were in something totally different, I want to know about that. So let's start with Brian, if you would introduce yourself, give us an idea of your relationship to Learn. What did you do before it? And while we're at it, what are you doing now? What are you up to these days?
Totally. Yeah. Hi. My name is Brian. I went to Learn Academy. I was in Delta 2020 cohort. So that was a couple of years ago. And I'll go ahead and do 1, 3, 2 in the order of those questions. Because the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm currently working as a software engineer at Visor. And Visor was my internship company. coming out of Learn. And prior to that, I was also a stage actor. I worked in theater and also was a teaching artist and a music director. And kind of like Adam just said about, do you ever use any of that? It's literally the same job. It's literally the same job. We're creating a curated experience for an audience. It's the same thing. It's different tools, it's different scale, slightly different goals in that it's more about utility than catharsis. But in both of them, you're wanting to, hopefully make people happy, help them do things in their lives. And I think the other thing I think that is kind of interesting about me is that I had to stop doing theater because of health issues. And I actually had a career gap, an unemployment gap of 7 years before I came to Learn. Like I didn't know what I was going to do. Saw a thing about it through a mutual friend on Facebook. I'm like, oh, I can probably handle sitting up at a computer for 8 hours in my own house every day, since that's what I was currently doing at the time. So it's like, we'll try that. And I don't even know what else I would have done. It's been amazing.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Brian. I got questions to ask you, so we'll get to them after those. Yeah, it's good. All right, moving clockwise around my faces here, Nicole, if you would.
Yes, thank you, Adam. So my name's Nicole, and I am associated with Learn from first being a student in Delta of 2022. And then after that, I was hired on. So I'm now an associate instructor at Learn. And before all of this, I was in the Navy for about 7 years as a military police. So it's my background, where I'm at, and how I got here.
Very stellar. Yeah, a lot of vets come through the program, which is awesome. And I'm super stoked that y'all have a chance to join us. That's great. Ari.
Hello, my name is Ari. I graduated from the 2022 Foxtrot cohort, picked one of the calmer backgrounds, believe it or not, from my cohort to bring with me. They yanked me right out of the tanks at Petco, spent 4 or 5 years over there as a senior aquatic specialist. I was very focused on animals and animal care, but there's a lot of stuff that happens with animals. The people in that career are not necessarily the kind of people I wanted to be around. So I decided to jump headfirst into Learn, and I'm now currently working with my internship company, Explore STEM, building a science application meant for 5th to 7th graders, I think is the goal. So yeah, that's me. Happy to be here.
Very cool. Vanessa, moving around the clock here. Vanessa's got a 2-part story as far as her association to Learn. So we expect to hear both parts.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's fun to be here. Learn. So I worked for Learn in 2016 and 2017, when we were still fully in person. We had not yet developed the relationship with the vet tech program. It was different then. And I was the marketing manager for Learn. Then I took a break from working. I had 2 sweet babies. And last year, this is my daughter's first year in kindergarten. So that obviously frees up a lot of time. And so it really got my wheels turning about, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back into marketing? And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then I just thought, Jumpstart was a pretty amazing weekend, because I attended Jumpstart when I was previously working with Learn. And it was such a fun weekend. It was so engaging. And I remember thinking like, wow, if I weren't 9 months pregnant right now, I would want to think about doing this program. And so then I realized like, oh, I could do it now. So that's what I did. I joined, I was in the 2022 Echo cohort. it was a really incredible experience to have come from this background of working at Learn, knowing a lot of the people at Learn, and then coming back and meeting so many new faces, and then experiencing things from the other side of the table. It was amazing. It was really cool. And then I did my internship program with this fantastic company, and a conference was coming up and they had an extra ticket. And so I kind of did the scary thing, and I was like, hey, I know I'm not an employee here, but is that ticket up for grabs for interns? And they thought about it and they said, well, sure, get yourself to Houston and feed yourself while you're there, and you can stay in our like team space and we'll give you the ticket. And I did. And that was really cool because I got a chance to really reconnect with Chelsea, who's the CEO and co-founder of Learn, and just had some really wonderful conversations. And it turned out that there was a position opening back up in marketing. And so now I've returned back to Learn, in a professional capacity. So I am the community engagement specialist here. And I'm having such a great time getting to apply, my knowledge of the frameworks and the languages and the terminology, but also still really hitting all of those things in marketing that I loved. Yeah, that's my story.
Very good. Wonderful. Well, it's exciting to have you back. And of course, last but not least, TJ Cutter.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I'm TJ, the director of marketing here at Learn. I've been with Learn for 5 years now, and my career change journey is a little different. I've been in marketing for 10 years now. So I found Learn just about halfway through. I've worn a lot of different hats from, before Learn, I was selling solar and cold calling people, from working from financial advisors and helping them build financial plans. In college, I was a DJ at nightclubs and all the lights in San Diego and all that. I was a waiter. So I think what's really cool is I can understand and empathize with a lot of people who are making this career change and this transition from where they've been to, and also taking a lot of the skills that they've brought from these different career paths and applying them to what they're doing now, because I feel that too. I feel a lot of these skills, from my past that, have influenced me to where I am today.
Wonderful. Well, I want to kick this off to talk a little bit about the prereqs, because this is one of the common questions that I will hear, which is, what do I need to know beforehand? Do you need to be good at math? Do you need to, do I need to have had a CS degree to get into this industry? All of these sorts of things. And I can say definitively no. But I'm curious though, I want to ask specifically, and what I'll do is I'll kind of call somebody out. And if you have something you want to contribute, jump on in, no big deal. I'm just curious about the topic of, what are the prerequisites, do you think? And I know an easy answer is none, but I would imagine there's a few things, or at least ways to think about it, or maybe places to start that kind of get the ball rolling, and that the barrier entry is probably lower than most people think. But what prerequisites come to mind? Things that you might want to focus on beforehand, or consider, or think about, or maybe things that you either did or could do differently that would help somebody, as far as moving from one path to another, right? Like, where would you start again? So let me actually start with Brian. I might as well, we'll just continue this a little bit. Thoughts on, where would you start if you wanted to just kind of get your feet wet, get an idea for whether or not, being in software development in any way, shape, or form is something worth pursuing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of the standard. There's a lot of kind of like free tutorial things on the web. Khan Academy, Code Academy, Free Code Camp. I think even like Coursera. There's a decent amount of just like random things that are sort of associated to different things that you might be interested in, just regular HTML, CSS courses. There's a lot of resources kind of like that out there that would just allow you to, dip your foot in, see if you like it. Is this something you're interested in, something you want to do? So there's, I mean, honestly, I think one of the hardest parts about it is that there's so many of them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because there's a ton. There's so many.
You can be very paralyzed about, I need to pick the right one. You don't need to pick the right one. You just need to pick one. it's fine.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, do you think like which of the programming languages do you think you'd start with as more kind of get your feet wet? Because there's a lot of talk around JavaScript and React, and then of course there's Ruby, but then there's also kind of the tried and true starter, just getting used to HTML and CSS and something
Yeah.
along those lines. Like, where do you think you would, if you were starting from zero again and you were just trying to explore, knowing what you know now, where do you think you would start? What would you start to try and understand to get an idea?
You know, I think that JavaScript and React are kind of the most accessible. And there's a lot of resources about that. Ruby's fine. We actually at our company, we started with a Ruby app, and then we were early enough in the life cycle that we're kind of like, hey, let's actually maybe make a switch to something else. And we're now in the process of converting everything over to Rust. I would not suggest starting with Rust because it's weird. But I think, yeah, just the standard, React, JavaScript, things like that. Ruby's totally fine. And there are many places that are continuing to use it today, at great scale. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the kind of prior experience level is with anybody listening. So kind of give a little bit of a primer, because this could be a big area of confusion. So
Yeah.
As a programmer, you're going to touch a lot of different languages or styles of writing, all of the gibberish that you've probably seen that we all call code. And generally speaking, how it works is that you have a web browser like not Internet Explorer, that was really dated, but like Chrome as an example, or Firefox or Safari. And all of that's going to take all of that random stuff and it's going to interpret it into the things you see. So text boxes, images, colors, all of that. And so when you're going into programming, software development, it's going to feel a little bit like you're drinking from the fire hose, because you can't learn just one of those pieces, because just one of those pieces won't give you enough information to create much. So you end up having to learn a bunch of different things simultaneously, which can be really overwhelming because things are written differently. But trust me when I say that, take a few big sips and all of a sudden things are going to start to click. You're going to start to notice what things are very similar to another, and how common certain different patterns and approaches tend to be, and it's just going to start to click in and make sense. But I'm curious to hear from somebody else, like, where might you start if knowing what you know now and keeping in mind that you're starting from zero, where would you find yourself going? Let me ask a question of Ari. So like, where would you go if you knew what you knew now, but you had to start over from zero?
Honestly, especially after going through Learn, and you'll see these over and over and over, people saying learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript if you want to get into web development. And there's a reason for that. I know a lot of people want to jump straight to React because it is one of the most popular frameworks right now. However, if you learn the fundamentals of JavaScript and get into like DOM manipulation, and you can code something with just HTML and JavaScript, not even necessarily CSS, you will have the framework to understand exactly what it is that all of these big libraries are doing. And making a step forward, you can look at a vast direction of different technologies that are out there and just take your pick. Because when you have that foundation, one, if you learn JavaScript and you go, God, I hate this language, but the fundamentals are there, go do Python, go learn, Ruby, go learn something else. But it's foundational to teach you, especially for web development, whether or not you're going to like it and whether or not you're going to be able to pick up other frameworks later. I think it's better to get that foundation, because what ended up happening for me was, I learned React really fast and I had a decent knowledge of HTML and CSS before, and everything React did was so confusing until I started reading documentations about what exactly React was doing and breaking it all down. So that would be my recommendation, is the tried and true HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or at least HTML and JavaScript if you don't want to mess around with style.
Yeah, great. I actually want to, unless somebody else had something else they wanted to contribute, I wanted to jump around a little bit. Anything else from anyone else that they wanted to add to that?
The one thing I was thinking, like on a super entry level thing,
Yeah.
find a coding game like Flexbox Froggy, like that thing that's in Jumpstart every time. There are very simple. They probably aren't Flash games anymore. That's probably not the behind it, but you can go and just find really super. Like, I mean, they're basically they're for kids kind of, but it's fine. It's for anybody. And you'll go really simple on some of the basic things you need. So if you're looking for something really, really easy entryway, I would suggest that.
Very cool. I dig that. So I want to take a step back and talk about the motivation that you had to make the change. Because each of us have our own motivations, but they often they tend to harmonize, right? So we tend to have a similar sort of view on things, but we come through different vehicles. Some of us have different resources, different means, and all that stuff. But I want to speak a little bit to the motivation. What drove you into making a career change from where you were to where you are now? And I know, Brian, you talked about kind of having health issues and that being, it sounded like that was a partial motivator for you. So I'm curious, Nicole, you come from at least more recently a military background, and so there was an aspect there, and then you left the military, if I understand correctly, and then kind of making the pursuit down this direction. Aside from that, what was a motivation that comes to mind for you that drove you into now choosing software development as a career path versus one of the many different things you could probably utilize your benefits and all the things to do? Why software?
Oh, absolutely, Adam. So the most close to home motivator was definitely my brother. My older brother has been in software developing for like 10 plus years now. And I mean, since graduating high school, he's kind of been there. Hey, you should really check this out. And, when you're young, no, I have my own path. So I checked out the military, and I wouldn't regret it. I would do it again 100 times again. But it just wasn't what I was looking for. And so towards the end of my last contract, I kind of was talking to my brother about what exactly he does and exactly how it's helped him, because even in my brother, as like, knowing him on that personal level, I saw a 180-degree change once he got into this industry. Like, just the freedom that it allowed, it allowed him to be himself. He's always felt like trapped in a box when it came to like any other job that he's held. So seeing that firsthand, definitely, once I got to that age where I knew the military was not for me, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna check this out. So as Brian was saying, I was doing free code camp my last year in the Navy. And then once that interest was peaked on my end, it was full send. I separated, and then I found Learn, and it was the best decision.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what, kind of speaking to the other side of that, which is, what were you afraid of? Like, I would imagine that there was a degree of some level of risk rattling around in your head of like, I don't know, that this won't work out or something like that. Like, was there any kind of core fears or anything along those lines that were coming up for you at all as you were trying to make that choice to go down this path? Or was it kind of like a nope, 100% game on, it's gonna work?
No, absolutely. There was an tremendous amount like of fear and uncertainty that I had, because so not only am I leaving the stability that the Navy was providing me, right? It's just like, it goes back to the transparency of, my own upbringing, right? So it was unstable. So that was all I knew. So taking this leap into this unknown was crazy scary. So, I mean, from just even reaching out, so going to learn.org and like making that first contact, that initial contact was nerve-wracking for me, because it was like, how do I know this is the right choice? Well, how will you ever know? So I feel like once I found the motivation to fully go through the admission process, I was pedal to the metal. I said, I'm gonna make it work. Because at that point I had no other choice. I was like, you know what, I separated, this is it. Like, I'm gonna make it work. And that's what I did. So just hard charging, just full steam.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard move to make. I mean, I feel really lucky in a lot of ways in that I kind of found myself into it. And one of the benefits of coming from stage acting is I look like a natural extrovert, but in reality, it's a trained behavior. Extroversion is kind of name of the game. And so I feel lucky that my comfort in front of people I don't know has been able to help me kind of dive into uncertain situations. But there's a lot of people, most people don't have that as a part of their life path. And so either they identify more as being introvert or quiet. And so the idea of like going into something very new where there's a ton of uncertainty, bunch of people that they're not familiar with that may not have similar backgrounds as them at all, like might feel really kind of scary and incredibly uncertain. So I get it from a distance. And so it's always curious to me. I'm always fascinated when I kind of hear people's stories coming through that transition. Ari, if I wanted to ask you a very similar question, like two parts. First was, what was your biggest motivator? And two, what was a big fear or two that came up for you as you're kind of making the choice to go from here to there?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest, quality of life was probably one of the biggest ones, not just in regards to money, but also like the freedom to kind of work from anywhere, is how it seems to be with tech these days. And also, especially in the animal care fields, if you want to become a nurse or vet tech, or anything like that, there's still a lot of rules about having colored hair, having tattoos, wearing jewelry, having nails, like not expressing yourself like that. And I've always been a very, yeah, I have bright blue hair, and that's never going away. So when I went into this, I've always kind of taken on this mindset of I can't fail. It's not going to happen. I can't let that happen. So I was literally working Saturday, Sunday, full shifts, going to learn Monday through Friday, staying up until 12 or 1 a.m., just trying to figure everything out. And failure wasn't an option for me. So was I scared? Yeah, absolutely. There's always that part of me that's like, well, what if you fail? What if you can't do this? What if you get out and you can't find a job? But then you just have to turn around and be like, I'm not going to. Because the alternative is that I didn't get myself anywhere after putting myself through all of this. And that's not going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen. So, it's kind of a constant thing of living with that. Oh, well, what if you mess up? Well, I'm not going to mess up. I'm not going to let myself mess up. We're just going to keep pushing through it. Even if I mess up, like ultimately every mess up I've ever made in my life has pushed me forward somewhere I wouldn't have been if I hadn't messed up. So I can live with the fear.
That is stellar. I love that. There was an analogy used at a conference I went to years ago talking about success. And the individual at the conference was saying, success is like standing in line at a cafeteria, that everyone gets to the back, but if you stand in it long enough, you will get to the front. Now, if you end up distracted, you're stepping out of line. And where do you end up going? Right back to the beginning again. And here's the irony, is that the initial fear is when you're at the back of that line that it's so long, it's going to take forever, I'll never ever get there. And so it's easy to kind of look at that as the cost of involvement and be discouraged by it. But if you remember, other people are going to get distracted and step out of line, and it's going to move you forward along that path much more quickly than it appears to be in the very beginning. And often that differentiator is the thing you just said there. And I loved what you said about the kind of mental resilience of like, even when I fear it, even when it comes up consciously in my mind, I'm going to tell myself, no, that's not what this is about. I am going to succeed at this. You got to muscle through. And it is totally true that especially in this path, people who are afraid that they won't know how to do the thing, they'll never learn how to code, they'll never figure it out. If they just stay at it, put enough reps in, they will get there. It's inevitable. It is just not something that you fail at easily unless you let yourself fail at it easily. So that is awesome. Well, got a couple of questions coming in, which is wonderful. So let me just start at the top. So Chris asks, how has working in tech lined up against your expectations? as far as a life balance and type or quality of work. So because Ari, you talked about that work-life balance aspect of things, I'd love to get your response to it. And if you need a minute, that's fine. Just let me know. And if somebody else has an idea, by all means. But again, if you could probably read it there in the chat, how has working in tech lined up against your expectations? And as far as life balance, what type or quality of work? So, Ari, you got any thoughts, or anyone else for that matter?
Yeah, I think I had this. I was doing a very physical job before. I don't know if anybody's ever done an aquarium maintenance, but you're lifting gigantic buckets of water, dumping them, lifting them, dumping them. So it was a very physical job, and I desperately wanted out of it. And I thought, oh, well, getting into tech is going to be so much easier. You just sit in a chair all day and like stare at a computer screen. But I have found myself some days getting more mentally tired than I've ever felt in my life, because it works your brain. Like, I'm sacrificing, my body's not in physical constant stress anymore, but my brain is getting worked so much more than it ever was before. But that's not to say the balance is bad. It has been a drastic improvement. My salary's better. I get to spend more time with my pets, my cat that yells at me every single day. My family, like everybody's seen. I just am in a much better mood. The work, I wouldn't even call it harder than what I was doing before. It's just a different job. I think people have it in their heads that getting into tech is going to be some like mystical, oh my God, I'm hacking into everything. It's the Matrix screens like 24/7 in my head. It's not. It's just another job. And I really enjoy it. It's been a really good shift for me.
Anyone else have thoughts on that one? Brian, Nicole, or Vanessa? Anybody?
I mean, it's been great. I have a 30-second commute. But part of it has to do with the company that I work at. The company that I work at is amazing about us taking care of ourselves. Like, and we're a startup. And usually what you hear about startups is, oh God, 24/7, 365, all this stuff. Like, no, 9 to 5. And it's expected when the day's done, we're done. If something catches on fire, yes, someone will have to put it out. And at times I have stayed later in order to do that. But it's been great. My boss on the one-on-one is saying, he's like, you have PTO, right? Take your PTO. Like I'm being told to do that, rather than it being something that I have to feel bad about. It's been great. And yes, it is mentally, it can be very complicated and taxing. I mean, actually during Learn, when like the fire hose of information is happening, I have this story where, I don't know if you've ever like pulled your hamstring, like the physical sensation you have when you pull a muscle. It was probably like second or third week of the boot camp. And I was done for the day, and I went and I flopped on my couch, and that physical sensation, I felt that like on my brain. Like I pulled my brain. I had been thinking so hard. But it's good. It's really good. I mean, work life is great. And especially to have come, I mean, going from pretty much zero to where I am now, to where I can be in the very near future, probably. I don't know anything else that would have gotten me as far as fast.
Yeah, I think something that comes to mind for me, because I worked at a tech startup before I was at Learn the first time. And I think it's something that being in tech and now having like more technical skills, you just have the ability, you have a strength of knowing that you can be really deliberate with choosing where do I want to be? What's the kind of company I want to work for? Because the first tech startup that I worked for was very much that quintessential, you do everything, you are there as often as they need you to be. That's the expectation. And you know, just not necessarily being valued. And I think it just highlights the importance of evaluating, what are my priorities? What kind of a company do I want to work for? How do I want to feel when I'm working there? Because now, being back in, you know, the working world again, the traditional working world again, and working for a company that really values me just as a human being, not as some automaton, is incredible. And having these technical skills and the technical knowledge means that I have felt the comfort and confidence in myself to get back to this spot.
I love that. While we're talking about the work-life balance, or at least how life balance is in there, I know that a handful of us are parents. I myself am a parent of a couple of young kids, and the obligations of being a parent are pretty extreme, especially when it comes if you feel or identify as a provider in your household. So making a change becomes at least for me at this point in my life, I feel lucky because I had kids later along versus earlier on, but I would imagine that'd be really scary. And so I wonder, for those of you who are parents or have somebody that you are very much the caretaker to, or a kind of the breadwinner of sorts, like, how did you reconcile that in your head? How did you get to a point where you could make that move and feel and reconcile that feeling of uncertainty and obligation, and not kind of back down from that? What did you do? How did you handle that? And I know that a lot of us are parents here, and so I'm just curious, please. Actually, Vanessa, I want to ask you, because I know you've got a couple of kids and you brought this up, and I'm really curious, like, how did you reconcile it in your mind? What were you looking for? What did you need to have in place to make that work for you and your family?
Sure. So I think something that really helped me out, is the fact that, you know, I had been involved in tech layoffs, and I had been in marketing then. And so I just had this overwhelming feeling as I was going, okay, it's time for me to start working again and bringing in money and to be able to support myself and my girls. And I just knew that if I didn't change something, if I didn't make a big leap and change something big about it, that I was going to continue to have these self-confidence issues because of the layoffs that I had been a part of. And so I just found myself in this rock on a hard place situation. Well, what are you going to do? Because I don't, you know, I live in a high cost of living place and I can't just move because, you know, one of the benefits of being here is that I've lived here since I was 5. I have a really big network. I've had children here. And so I've developed a really strong parenting network here, which really you can't replace that. So for me, that was just a really big piece of it, is knowing that I just needed to make a big leap and really bet on myself. And I knew that doing that with Learn, I knew unquestionably that the humans that run the show at Learn are really decent humans. And so if I'm putting in the work, they're going to do everything they can to help me to get to a good spot in my life.
Nicole, I also know you're a parent as well. Like, how, in your eyes, did you reconcile some of that decision making, or were you like, kids who? I don't even know. Like, they'll be fine. I put out some food. They'll be cool. What?
No, absolutely. I'm 100% dittoing what Vanessa said. I think that with a thing that I really want to highlight about Learn, oh my gosh, this was a crutch in a lot of like some seriously questioning days for me, was the parents that work and are supported at Learn. So on the instruction and staff, there's so many parents on that side to relate to the parents who are students coming through. And so just the revolving door of support that Learn gets and then gives is just incredible. So I think that I mean, of course you have your doubts on, in your own home as far as, am I making the right decision? Is this gonna, bite me in the butt later? But as far as coming to class and like having that reassurance, it definitely helped mute that pretty early on for me personally in the cohort, as far as, okay, this is probably the best, it definitely is the best decision that I've ever made. And so coming into the community, I know I'm supported in that aspect, which is very hard to find for a parent anywhere else. My previous career was not parent friendly at all. So that was like a really, really, really valuable thing for me personally coming to learn.
So it sounds like that very much was kind of a prerequisite of the decision making, was that the culture of the company aligned to the needs that parents would be experiencing, right? So for you, that was a big one. Brian, do you have kids or not?
I do not know.
Yeah. Oh, you don't? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that for me as a father, that it very similarly, like it is a hardcore prerequisite. Like it's the first thing I filter my decision making through in a lot of ways, even down to traveling to conferences or whatever is like, how is this going to impact my family? And so again, I feel lucky that I came into parenthood later on after I kind of worked out some kinks, whereas a lot of people don't. They're making this transition and this choice. They're taking this leap in the middle of raising kids. And so if I could, I want to ask one more question about this, because I do know that many people who are going to watch this, whether you're in the room now or you're going to watch this later, are going to be coming with this as an obligation in their life. And so I'm curious, what preparation did you do, or how did you process the choice? I want to speak specifically to that. What are, Nicole, you pointed out a couple of things that you look for specifically through other members of the team that would clearly like resonate with that cause and that need. Vanessa, you talked about a few things there, but talk to me about the decision-making process. If you were talking to another parent right now, what would you advise they think about process as far as them choosing to make a career transition, whether they go to learn or not? Like how would you recommend they process that decision-making? And Vanessa, I'll start with you, if I would.
Okay. Yeah, I think on a practical level, you need to be thinking about, what's my network? Where are my kids going to be during the day? Are they going to be at school? Is there a preschool option? When I started my program, my children had childcare until like 2:30 and 3 p.m. And so I went into it going, okay, well, I'm going to need, someone's going to need to be with the kids until 5, because that's when I'm not going to be available. And I had plan A and I had a plan B, and I'm really glad I had plan B, because plan A did not work out. So plan B was, all right, I'm going to have to find a way to pay extra for the extended childcare, but having that already preset, I knew what I was going to do. I had the ripcord to pull, had to pull it, made it was still a stressful situation, but at least I had already done that pre-planning and mitigated some of that stress. And just, like, your community is the most important thing. So the more you can have a community of neighbors, friends, if you're lucky enough that you've got family in town that enjoys watching kids and is willing to watch your kids, having that preset and just being really honest with the people that are there to support you and saying, hey, this is going to be a really wild time in my life. We're all going to need a lot. And also like pre-teaching with your kids and explaining, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it because I want to be able to get a job. Have that flexibility. So this is going to be, X amount of time, whatever that looks like. If that is, I'm going to make you a calendar. Let's decorate the calendar together. Let's highlight, these are the days that I'm going to be in school. These are the days you're going to be with your grandparents, or you're going to be at school longer, and giving them time to process it so that they're not just going in on day one being like, what? You're not here now all of a sudden, everything's changing. Like giving that time to ease that transition as much as you can.
Wonderful. Nicole, any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. So Vanessa, number one, hit the nail on the head with the hammer with that one. So the 3 keys to success here is a plan for that plan, and then communication. Because I thought I was the only one. I'm so glad just listening to Vanessa just now. That was like she was in my life. No, absolutely. So we moved here that February. Before I started the cohort in June, I had just moved to California. Well, we had just moved to the area in February. So we hadn't yet had that community. And throughout the course of my time as a student, our plans, the plan A, we got to, I think, like plan D. So it was hectic, but amazing that my spouse was just, awesome like she is. So we were able to lean on each other, communication, and like I said, a plan for your plan, because you might have to get to your plan D of action. So definitely I resonated so well with what Vanessa was saying just now.
Yeah, I love that. It's really easy to feel alone in the journey. And what I loved about what both of you said, and a lot of it resonates too, because my counterpart at Learn is the CEO, Chelsea, and we both have kids that are best friends. And so she and I can commiserate a ton on all the different dynamics of having kids together. And I will say, one of the reasons why I feel very supported where I'm working right now is because there is a shared understanding about, one, how important it is in our lives, not that it needs to be important to everyone else, but it is to us. And two, that there's a complete empathy and understanding that is the number one priority for us. And so everything else, including our work, has to fit around that. But again, it's not that you need to agree with that, but in terms of knowing how that gets reconciled when you make that transition, probably is going to matter if you are or identify as a parent or a caretaker. So awesome. That is great. And thank you for that. Okay, well, we've got about 10 minutes left. I got a couple of questions here from Xavier, so I want to hit on these. And specifically, so the first one on the list is, how do you go about building a portfolio or showcasing your coding skills to potential employers? And the second is, how do you handle the transition from being a beginner to gaining enough experience to land your first coding job? So for the sake of time, I want to hone in on the second question, just because the nature of this is mostly around career transitions. And if we don't get to the first question, just know, Xavier, that we're happy to connect with you, because our career services team can help figure that type of subject matter out if we don't get the time. But if we do, great, we'll get there too. So second question is, how do you handle the transition from being a beginner to gaining enough experience to land your first coding job? And I want to pass it over to Brian first, and then Ari, I'd love to get your opinion on it as well. So how did you handle the transition from being a beginner, gaining through experience, then ultimately landing your first coding job, and then if you've had subsequent ones?
Yeah. So I think that's something that's really interesting here, is that the world of software development is so vast and disparate that you will always be a beginner on some level. Like I know some amazing software engineers that have parts of it like that they just don't know anything about. So I don't know how much of a comfort that is, but on some level, it never goes away. And it's all right. Everyone's always learning. That's always a thing. And so like if you're, it's not like you're going to level up and all of a sudden, be a level 5 software engineer and now you can get hired places. No, you need to be comfortable in what you do, but there is no like, now you're ready. And if you try too early, that's a terrible thing. It's not. Be where you're at, be doing your best, be growing your skills, and be around people, which hopefully is going to become easier, now that the world is sort of getting back to normal. But it's super important to have a support system, both a personal one and a professional one. I think just the last thing I'm going to say is something that was a huge help for me as it was happening, and even now, is that there is another guy who was in my cohort with Lauren, who we went to that the internship together, and we both got hired. So we're on the same journey, and that's wherever you do your learning, whether it's at Learn, whoever you do your learning with is actually your most valuable network. Like, people think about networking being like external and, oh, I need to go meet some famous person that's just going to give me stuff. But where it's going to be strongest are the people that you're learning with. If you can find people that you mesh with and you allow yourselves to support each other, that is invaluable. That you know, so in my case, I go in there, you know, and we learned what arrays were together. You know, we learned like the basic stuff. So when I had questions, like we have that history, and we know that we're not dumb. You know, something's like, oh, I better not ask that question because I might look bad. No, it's fine. You know, sometimes. So when you can have that kind of relationship, so I would really encourage you to try to get some stuff like that wherever you do it.
Love that. Ari, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like everybody calls it a transition. There is no transition. You're a beginner, you get hired, and you're still a beginner who feels like you don't know anything, but they're paying you for it. So, like, everybody calls it a transition. There is no transition. Like, you are constantly learning things. Like, my coworker has a bachelor's degree in computer science and can talk about, you know, advanced programming concepts that just go way over my head. But then as soon as I bring up something related to JavaScript, she has no clue what I'm talking about. None. Has no familiarity with anything that I'm doing. I'm like, oh, look, I made a card to go on the page. And she says, what? What is this? What is this doing? I don't understand. What is map? So there is no transition. And you never really, at least in my case, you never really feel like, oh, all right, I'm not a beginner anymore. I am like so advanced. I'm so good at my job. I know everything there is to know. I Google things daily. It's a part of my whole process. I am constantly Googling things, big things like, you know, how an entire concept works, little things like, oh my God, what is the code for this one command again that I can't remember? So I feel like people always put it as a barrier of, I can't start applying until I've hit this level. I can't reach out. I can't do this. I can't do that until I have 5 portfolio pieces. I'm going to give you a little piece of advice here. Portfolio pieces help, obviously. You know, of course, having things to look at helps. You know, being really knowledgeable, feeling really comfortable helps. The thing that's going to get you hired is your personality. When you interview, if you're somebody who's able to, you know, they ask you a question that you don't fully know, but you respond without missing a beat and say like, well, here's what I do know about this thing. So that one thing, I'm a little bit shaky, but I'm a super fast learner and I'd love to get into that. So, you know, that's what you can't replace. And that's not dependent on some platform of knowledge that you just can't achieve yet. So don't think of it as, you know, a transition from beginner to getting hired. You are still going to be a beginner that got hired and now have a whole bunch of people, you know, counting on you and respecting you and believing in you because, you know, you can do it. So I'd say I don't even think of it as a transition. You're always going to be a beginner, you know, in something, just like Brian said.
Utterly love the heck out of that. And I can fully attest, I'm going to take the opportunity right now to fully attest to what Ari said. Ari, I don't know if I told you this or not, but when I did your mock interview, I literally said to the team, if I could have hired her on the spot, and I didn't even have a job for you, I would have done it. And it was because you approached it with such personality and you spoke to what you knew, not to what you didn't, but of what you knew. I loved that. So you definitely walk the walk. I want to show you, if you're not, for all of you watching, if you're not familiar, I want to show you an example. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So I want to share this real quick, and maybe you've seen this online. And this is a model representing the relationship between competence and confidence. And often what happens is as we gain a little bit of competence, our confidence level skyrockets to the peak of Mount Stupid, which is when we think we know a bunch, but the reality is we don't. And then quickly we discover as we learn more that we actually know very little. And so we have to maintain that beginner's mindset all the time for this very reason that, like you both said, like Brian and Ari both said, you're always learning. You're always a beginner at something. And that's actually the sign of experience, is recognizing that you really will never know it all. There's only so many parts that you will even understand at best. So I thought that was very, very cool answer. And I appreciate both of you for going through that. That's really cool. So with a handful of minutes left, Xavier, I don't think we're going to get to your question, but what I will remind you of is definitely we'll have the team connect with you and make sure that you get an answer to the question about building a portfolio and showing off your coding skills to potential employers. The one thing I will say to that comes out of our career services curriculum that I think really matters is the more value you can show that you've brought to other people, the more value your portfolio has. So if you can, if you've got a church group maybe, or a community organization, or a friend or a family member that owns a business, and you can do a little something and show what you did to bring value to their life, I can say as an employer myself and working with a lot of other employers, that is a big mark, because that's exactly what we hope you'll do here, wherever here happens to be. So if you could find a ton of opportunities to even do little things where you bring value, and then illustrate that within a portfolio, then you are going to have a major heads up against other people who just do little projects that never see the light of day. So, but outside of that, we'll make sure you get some stuff. All right, I want to wrap it up here if I could. I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We're going to keep doing these. So please, if you are new to the idea of learning how to code and you're coming from a career transition and you have specific questions about, like, okay, this is my career I'm in, and this is my life conditions, and this is where I'm at, and my sense of obligations, and what do I do to go from here to there? We would love to be able to help coach you through that. And so we're happy to talk about and kind of give advice or some guidance as to where you go from here, because there's definitely a path to handle things like salaries and how do you offset your costs and what financing might be available if you want to take a program like ours or not. Or even, like Brian brought up, Khan Academy and other resources you can go to just get yourself started at no cost. You know, these are all options that we're happy to coach and consult you through, just because we want to help you out. All right. With that being said, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us. Big thank you to all of you. And with that, again, my name's Adam of Learn Academy. Thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You guys for coming.